Cyprus consulship, his parliamentarian didn't even let him deliver his farewell speech, so Liz, I still love you. There's nothing quite like the scene in Ben-Hur, in which Messala, the new tribune of Judea, steps off his horse, peers into the sunset, and whispers to his lieutenant Drusus, "When I was a boy, I dreamed of commanding this garrison. Now, the winds have changed. I am in command." Upon entering this office 1 year ago, I suppose you could say I could have stepped off my own high horse, peered into the eyes of my dearest friends, and confessed that holding this gavel fulfilled an aspiration I had held since childhood. And that would be true, for not even I can tell you how early in life I began to dream of the honor of standing before you in this capacity. But today, at the end of a 5-year career and a near lifelong ambition, of all the memories swimming through my mind, the least of those is that as a child, I imagined I could be your president. Rather, what you have taught me the last few days is that the presidency, with its combined challenges and burdens, has been a life lesson whose impact on my life I never could have imagined. Earlier this week, I told you that my first conviction 6 years ago was one of the first times in my life that I felt surrounded and embraced by people who understood me. But like all politicians, I must have slightly misremembered my facts. At my first convention, I felt surrounded and embraced all right, and claustrophobic. As an 8th grader used to some success in state academic contests, the epiphany that I was just a little fish in a big pond swimming for my life, my Latin, and my dignity. Well, no more dignity anymore. Against sharks like Jacob Meister, busted my ambitious bubble. And though I've long since parted with my dignity, that first convention was tough for me. I stopped reading Cicero afterwards for weeks. But life is all about adaptation. The day my mid-teen crisis ended was the day I looked in the mirror and told myself, "Brandon, a lot of people you have met and will meet in your life have been and will be smarter," Jacob Meister, "more talented," the piano man, and better looking, Zach Fenno. Great knowing you, buddy, but deal with it. And you know what? I dealt with it. And the day I came not only to accept, but even to find comfort in my limitations, was the day I first felt like a president. To stand here in the full light of your confidence, knowing that unbelievably talented and dedicated people such as you elected me, is, if not completely ludicrous, then the supreme honor, no, the greatest gift I could ever ask for. I will attempt then, in the next few moments, to return only a small portion of that favor by speaking on a matter that has become both my personal and professional passion during my term. What I want to know is why we place such emphasis on the classics' ability to transform our lives if we believe, as we are sometimes inclined to think, that there is no greater reason to study the classics than that they are merely beautiful. In other words, that they are nice things, but ultimately useless. I cannot accept that. The profound importance we place here on cultivating knowledge about antiquity and improving ourselves through that knowledge seems, to me at least, to suggest that being knowledgeable or a good person will prove practical on more than just a blind date with Susan Shearer. Only the classics can inform us of history, and only history can inform us of our world, and only informed people can make a powerful and beneficial difference in their own society. The whole crux of the humanities is that people with potential shouldn't waste it. If we are willing, as National Junior Classical Leaguers, to devote our summers, if not our lives, to studying the classics in order to understand and appraise our world through the lens of classical culture, then there is no excuse that we should simply do nothing with that knowledge. Brain power mandates horsepower. So when you leave this place and find yourself in an officer meeting thinking, how will I make a difference? Think to yourself, your imagination alone will determine your success. Because if you're the kind of person even considering making a difference, that kind of person was put in place by prior inspiration from the noble Greeks and Romans. At the end of a long journey, I cannot help but look back and acknowledge the faces and hands and hearts that guided me along the way. Some of these faces belong to men I've never met, men like Demosthenes, Cicero, or Plutarch, but in a sense, they are men whom I want to meet more closely every time I look in the mirror. Other faces belong to people whom I have met and who have exemplified what we idealize in the classics. These people mean a great deal to me, not because they ignited my ambitions, but because they transformed them. Ms. Conklin and members of the National Committee, thank you for your diligence, guidance, friendship, and above all, humor. It was predominantly through you I learned that when a president leads, he listens. Fellow officers, before I ran for this office, I stayed awake at night wondering whether the 7 of you would be too tough to handle. Now I stay awake at night wondering whether I was the tough one. In all honesty, I couldn't have asked for a better group of colleagues and friends. Here's to growing old, cranky, and nostalgic together. Mrs. Altieri, Mrs. Vasquez, Mrs. Dutra, and Ms. Curler, Ms. Marcus, and those of you who contribute more than we realize behind the scenes. I speak on behalf of the entire convention when I say that you are the real deal. This convention would not exist without you. We are indebted beyond any hope of repayment to the time, the energy, and above all, the imagination you put into making this convention a success. I would also like to extend my thanks to the omnipotence, omnipresence, what's the other one? Omniscience and indispensableness of the NJCL. Yay! I also have to thank Neha Patel and Rupnik for preventing Nudie Ludi from becoming a personal reality for me at this convention. Secondly, let me extend my gratitude to several delegations in particular. California, this convention would have been impossible without your support. My dance moves and I are eternally indebted. New Jersey, from the moment you put me in your maid's outfit last convention, I knew we were destined for each other. I look forward to not doing that today, and to taking it a little more slowly as I join your SCL in the fall. Ohio, what I learned in 2 days at your state convention altered the perception of this organization that I had held for over 6 years. You left me speechless, which, trust me, is saying something. Georgia, you ignited Grace on fire, so thank you for smoking. Last but not least, my dear, beloved Louisiana, it has been a privilege, an unspeakable privilege, to serve on your behalf these past 5 years. I will miss you dearly, but will sleep soundly in my dorm room 1,327 miles away from your state convention. Yes, I Google mapped it. Knowing that my sister, who is here today, is well on her way to achieving a Bark dynasty. I cannot close without thanking my parents who gave birth to me, Cicero, who gave birth to Latin, and my Latin teachers, who gave birth to my love of Latin. But above all, I am eternally indebted to Dennis and Susan Webb. Mr. Dennis and Miss Susan, you wrote to me that you were honored to think of yourselves as having had only a small part in my accomplishments. But you must realize that you have not only enabled all of my accomplishments, you have given them meaning by exemplifying the merits of a life given over to sacrifice and service. I will always think of you as a second father and as a second mother. After countless JCL speeches, I find that at long last, I've simply run out of words. I think Mr. Walker is especially happy. That's a good thing for you, but it's good for me too, because nothing, I think, could be more classical. If you believe, as I do, in facta non verba, if you believe in the unspoken eloquence of Cincinnatus, then let my deeds and the deeds of my fellow officers speak for themselves this year. Let us resign the gavel for the plow, as it were, and return to our first love of the classics. Our work, at least in this role, is done. But as for all of us, acta non fabula est. Our story is only beginning. Thank you, ex imo pectora, for the opportunity and the lessons of a lifetime.